He thought it was just a client flight on the corporate jet. He thought I was still the compliant wife, signing papers without reading, smiling at his family's parties. But he did not know before that Jet took off with his mistress for the weekend. I had already blocked the $12 million he planned to use to make himself the new boss. And I will say it in front of the board. On the very night they planned to kick me out. My name is Kylie Hughes, and tonight, my husband, Grant Keaton, was hosting a dinner to celebrate my execution. He called it Celebrating the New Jet Contract. He told me to wear the dark blue dress he liked, the one that was professional but soft. He wanted me to look the part of the supportive, unknowing wife one last time. My husband, Grant Keaton, steered me into Auden, the most obnoxiously expensive restaurant in Harborcrest, by the small of my back. His touch was not affection, it was a public claim, a final branding before the slaughter. The valet, a young man who looked terrified of Grant's $500 shoes, took the keys to our car, and we walked inside. Evelyn and Charles Keaton were already seated. They were always already seated. It was one of their many silent power moves, a way to establish that the world waited for them, not the other way around. They occupied the corner booth. Table 12, the one that surveyed the entire dining room while remaining nestled in a protective alcove of dark wood and plush velvet. This was not a table for enjoying a meal. It was a throne for passing judgment. This was the same table where Evelyn, my mother-in-law, had informed Grant's younger cousin that his choice of university was beneath the family's expectations. The same table where Charles, my father-in-law, had sat in his terrifying, expensive silence as Evelyn dismantled a business proposal from one of his own executives, the man's career ending between the appetizer and the main course. It was, I had come to learn, the teaching table. Tonight, I was the lesson. "Kylie, darling," Evelyn said, her voice a smooth, cold river. She offered a cheek that smelled of money and a perfume I could never identify. "You look appropriate." "Evelyn, Charles," I nodded, taking my seat opposite Grant. The chair felt cold. Charles just grunted, a minimal acknowledgement that I existed in his airspace. He was a man of few words and infinite, suffocating disdain. He ran Lumen Edge Consolidated like a personal fiefdom, and he and Evelyn had raised their son to be the perfect, ruthless heir. The waiter, who knew them, appeared instantly. Champagne was poured without anyone asking. Grant raised his glass. The crystal chimed, a sound too delicate for the violence to come. "If I could have everyone's attention," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. He was CEO in waiting, and he played the part well. He stood, his tailored suit fitting him like a second skin. But he did not look at me. He looked past me, at his father. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, his smile radiating for the room. "To Lumen Edge Consolidated, to the new contract, the biggest in our division's history." He paused, and that small, smug smile settled on his lips. "And to a new chapter, to expansion, to new horizons." He finally turned his eyes to me. They were as flat and gray as the Harborcrest sky in winter. "To freer flights." Freer flights. The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. My stomach did not drop. It solidified. I felt a cold, hard calm settle over me, a feeling I had been cultivating for weeks. I thought of the company jet, our jet, the Lumen Edge Air Falcon. I thought of the flight logs I had pulled, the ones marked for Santa Aurelia, a private island resort, a destination I had wanted to visit, but Grant had always said was too complicated, logistically. A trip he had taken 2 weekends ago. I could feel their eyes on me, all 3 of them. They were waiting for me to flinch, to look confused, to ask, "What do you mean?" They wanted me to be the victim in their play. "But first," Grant said, sitting down, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone, as if we were all in on a joke I was the punchline of. "A little something for you, Kylie, to commemorate the occasion." He slid a thin, silver-wrapped box across the white linen. It was not a jewelry box. It was too long, too flat. My hands were perfectly steady as I undid the ribbon. I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on black velvet, was a laminated card. It was a high-gloss printout of a flight itinerary. Our company logo, LumenEdge Air, was at the top. The destination Santa Aurelia, the date 2 weekends ago, and in the passenger manifest field, circled in thick red permanent marker, were 2 words, 2 guests, pinned to the card. A small note, embossed with Grant's initials. I did not need to pick it up to read his aggressive, slanted handwriting. Some flights should just be for 2 people who truly fit. I heard a sound, a small, sharp exhale of breath. It was Evelyn. I looked up from the grotesque present. She was dabbing the corner of her perfect, surgically defined mouth with her napkin, her diamond earrings catching the light as she failed to hide her smile. She was glittering with amusement. "Grant, you are terrible," she whispered, loud enough for the table, and perhaps the next, to hear. She turned her icy gaze on me, the smile becoming a mask of faux sympathy. "But he does have a point, Kylie. Successful men. They simply need their own space. It is just the way of the world. You have to allow them their diversions." "A business necessity," Charles added, his first full sentence of the night. He raised his glass to his son. "Good for morale." They all watched me, Grant, smug, Evelyn, victorious. Charles, impassive, which was his version of enthusiastic approval. They were waiting for the tears, for the hiss of, "How could you?" for the thrown drink, for the scene that would confirm their narrative that I was unstable, emotional, unfit, the difficult wife who just did not understand the pressures on a man like Grant. They were going to be so deeply disappointed. I did not explode. I did not even flinch, because as I stared at the laminated proof of my husband's infidelity, I was not thinking about Santa Aurelia. I was not thinking about the other woman, Sloan Mercer, his mother's latest PR pet. I was thinking about today, the 5th of the month, the day the final payment for the new jet, the $12 million Gulfstream that was the supposed reason for this dinner, was scheduled to be wired to the brokerage in Switzerland, the wire transfer that Grant thought was going to Harbor Crest Strategic Procurement, a shell company he had set up 3 months ago. The wire transfer that I, as the head of assets for LumenEdge Air, controlled. I calmly, deliberately, folded the itinerary. The lamination made a crisp crackle. I tucked it into my clutch. Then, slowly, I picked up my champagne flute. I stood up. The movement was so unexpected it startled them. Grant's smile faltered. Evelyn's eyebrows shot up. A perfect, plucked arch of surprise. Even Charles looked momentarily confused. This was not in their script. "Thank you, Grant," I said. My voice was clear, ringing with a warmth that was utterly false, a perfect mirror of their own cruelty. "This is illuminating, and thank you, Evelyn, for the insight. It's so valuable." I raised my glass, not to them, but to the room, to the future. "You are absolutely right. It is a time for new chapters, and it is so important to have freedom." I turned my gaze back to my husband, locking his eyes, letting him see the smile that finally reached my own. "But you should know. You're not the only one here tonight who is about to declare it." They stared, mouths open, caught completely off script. They had planned a public execution, but they had forgotten to check if the victim was armed. To understand why I let them get this far, why I sat through their pathetic, cruel little play with the $12 million key sitting in my pocket, you have to go back 2 months. You have to go back to the moment I saw the first flight log. It did not happen overnight. Betrayal rarely does. The cracks in our marriage had been forming for at least 3, maybe 4 years. It started subtly, as these things always do. Grant, who once measured his life by closing deals, suddenly became obsessed with the investment division of LumenEdge. His work, which had always been demanding, became all-consuming, but in a different way. There were new work dinners that stretched into weekends, He changed his cologne. The woody, familiar scent I had known for a decade was replaced by something sharper, metallic, and impersonal. He switched gyms, opting for an exclusive downtown club that, he claimed, had better networking opportunities at 5 a.m. I never saw him work out, but he seemed tired in a way that was not from physical exertion. The clearest sign, the one that felt like a deliberate exclusion, was the death of our Sundays. We used to have a ritual: bicycles, the winding Harborcrest Bay Trail, coffee at the turnaround spot overlooking the water. It was simple. It was ours. Then, about 2 years ago, the ritual changed. He started appearing on Sunday mornings in golf attire. Not just any golf attire, but the specific, logoed polos of the Harborcrest Crestwood Club, the one his father co-founded. He would be leaving just as I was waking up, his keys jingling aggressively in the quiet of our sterile home. "Dad and Mom are expecting me," he would say, not looking at me. "You know how Charles is about tea times." I was never invited. It was a Keaton activity, and the message, delivered as clearly as a corporate memo, was that I was not, and would never truly be, a Keaton. Our communication, once a rapid-fire exchange of ideas, inside jokes, and shared dreams, withered. It did not die. It was professionally re-engineered. It reduced itself to the only language we had left: business. Our marriage became a series of calendar invites and action items. I, Kylie Hughes, the woman who built the entire private air division for his father's company, became just another executive on his schedule. Our texts were no longer, "I love you," or "thinking of you." They were, "Kylie, sign the attached leasing agreement. Check the schedule for the Dallas trip. The investors are complaining about the layover. The advisory team is asking about the leasing contract for the new jet. Handle it." It was cold, efficient, and hollow. We were a holding company, not a marriage. I tried. I genuinely tried. Our 7th anniversary was approaching. We had just finalized the purchase agreement for the new Gulfstream, the $12 million beauty that was supposed to be the crown jewel of LumenEdge Air. It was my project, my win, the result of 2 years of negotiations. I suggested we take it for its inaugural flight. Just us, a long weekend, maybe Santa Aurelia, the private resort I had bookmarked in travel magazines for years. Grant did not even look up from his phone when I mentioned it over a silent, sterile dinner at our oversized dining table. "Kylie, be realistic," he said. His voice clipped. "That aircraft is a tool for high-level clients and the board. It is not a family vacation toy." Family. The word felt like acid. We were a family of 2, and he was rejecting it. He was rejecting me. But the way he said it, a tool, it was as if he was reminding me that I, too, was just a tool. Useful, but not essential for pleasure. That refusal was what started the real suspicion. It was not the late nights. I was used to those. It was not the new cologne or the exclusive gym. Men in his position had midlife crises all the time. No. The alarm bell that finally rang loud enough for me to hear was his sudden, intense interest in LumenEdge Air, my division, my world. I had built that division from nothing. When I met Grant, I was an aviation logistician. Evelyn, in a rare moment of strategic brilliance, had suggested Charles hire me to organize their chaotic travel. I did more than organize. I turned their single, badly managed charter plane into a profitable, secure, and efficient private air fleet. I ran the manifests, the maintenance schedules, the financing, the compliance. I knew every pilot, every tech, every dollar. Grant hated aviation. He found the details tedious. He always said, "It's your thing, Kylie. Just keep my father happy and the FAA away." But suddenly, my thing became his interest. 2 months ago, he started requesting access to the internal scheduling dashboard, a system I designed. He claimed he wanted better visibility for investor relations. 2 weeks ago, I was reviewing the previous week's logs for the LE-8 Falcon, our current workhorse. A flight caught my eye. A Friday night. It had popped up just hours before departure. which was unusual for a non-emergency. The code was BD, Business Development. That was Grant's code. His excuse for the trip, as I recalled, was a last-minute dash to meet with partners in Miami. But the log read differently. The destination was not Miami. It was a private airstrip in South Carolina, which closed at sunset, meaning the plane was staying overnight, and the flight plan back was not until Sunday evening. I was staring at the log when Ben, one of our youngest and brightest technicians, the one I had mentored, came by my office with a fuel report. He glanced at my screen. "Oh, that was the BD flight. Right. Ms. Hughes?" he asked. Ben was the only one who still called me Ms. Hughes, a mark of respect I appreciated in a company that preferred first names to feign intimacy. "Yeah, the Miami run," I said. "Testing." Ben frowned, his brow furrowing. "That was not Miami. That was the coast. Weird flight." He lowered his voice, leaning against the door jamb. "The catering order was specific. Came straight from Mr. Keaton's office, not through the standard portal." He paused, looking almost embarrassed. "It was weird. Just 2 passengers, and they ordered rosé, a specific, expensive brand, and white roses. A whole arrangement." He shrugged, coloring slightly. "Just seemed more like a romantic getaway than a BD meeting. You know, a romantic getaway." The words hit me like turbulence. Rosé and white roses, not Grant's style. Definitely not the style of any business partner from Miami. I thanked Ben, telling him to check the fuel sensors on the Falcon's port engine, just to get him out of my office. As soon as he left, I locked my door. I pulled up the security feed from the private hangar, time-stamped for that Friday evening. My hands were shaking, just slightly. I fast-forwarded through the pilot's pre-flight checks, and there he was, Grant, in his casual, expensive weekend wear. He was not alone. He was with a woman. She had light brown hair, a slim build, and she was laughing. Her head tilted back as she looked up at him. She was not a client. She was not an investor. She was not anyone from our world. I went back to the manifest log. The primary passenger was Grant Keaton. The second passenger, listed only as guest, had a name attached for the FAA filing S. Mercer. S. Mercer. My blood went cold. It clicked. It all clicked. Sloan Mercer, Evelyn's new star. A sharp, ambitious woman in her late 20s, brought on 6 months ago as a special projects coordinator for the family's public relations. Sloan Mercer, who had been at every family dinner for the last 2 months. Sloan Mercer, who Evelyn had praised for her impeccable taste and understanding of the Keaton brand. Sloan Mercer, who was, at this very moment, probably sitting at her desk, just 2 floors above me. I sat back in my chair, the air leaving my lungs. It was not a gasp of pain. It was a cold exhale of realization. They were not just having an affair. He was not just cheating. He was using my assets to do it. He was taking the division I built, the planes I managed, the systems I put in place, and using them as his personal dating service. He was laughing at me, with his mother's blessing, on company property. The pain was sharp. Yes, but something else was sharper anger, a cold, focused, professional rage. He had made a mistake, a fatal one. He thought I was just a wife. He forgot I was an executive. He forgot that I was the one who signed the papers, who controlled the schedules, and who knew where every single dollar was routed. He thought this was a personal betrayal. He was wrong. This was a corporate malfeasance, and that, I knew exactly how to fight. The anger didn't last. The cold, clear rage I felt after seeing Sloan's name on the manifest didn't burn out. It simply cooled, hardening into something far more useful focus. I was done being a wife. It was time to be an executive. I went back to my desk, locked the door, and opened the one file Grant had been so eager for me to approve the financing for the new jet. This was the big one, the $12 million mid-size jet meant to handle our expanding east to west coast operations. It was a massive capital expenditure, and every detail had passed through my office. The purchase was my professional triumph. The the plane I had personally selected. And now, it was my weapon. I pulled up the final payment routing instructions, which Grant himself had forwarded to me for signature 2 days prior. The bulk of the financing was solid, standard stuff, but the final tranche, the $12 million, was different. His email, attached to the wire instructions, was casual, too casual. Kylie, see attached for the final wire on the Gulf Stream. Our partners in Switzerland found a way to route this through an intermediary to save us on the brokerage fees. Significant cost reduction. Just need your signature to get this processed. Let's get this done before the 5th. I stared at the intermediary account. The name was Harbor Crest Strategic Procurement LLC. It was a stupid name, obvious. It was the kind of name you give something when you're trying too hard to sound legitimate. I ran our entire approved vendor list for Lumen Edge, a database I had built myself. Harbor Crest Strategic Procurement LLC was not on it. It had never been vetted, never been approved by compliance, never passed a security check. This was not a partner. This was a ghost. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I ran a search on the state's public business registry. There it was. Harbor Crest Strategic Procurement LLC. Data formation, 3 months ago. Registered agent. A man I did not know, but when I cross-referenced the agent's name with Grant's LinkedIn profile, my blood froze again. This time with a grim certainty. The man was not just a stranger. He was a former colleague. He had worked with Grant at his old investment firm, the one he left before joining his father's company. He was one of Grant's guys. This was not a cost-saving measure. This was theft. I dug deeper, opening the internal email server. Using my administrative privileges Grant had forgotten I had. I searched for Grant's emails containing the LLC's name. He was sloppy. He was so arrogant, so sure of my ignorance, that he was sloppy. There was a chain between him, his father Charles, and the company's chief financial officer. Grant was pushing, hard. "We need this payment to clear before Monday," he had written. "It's critical it gets posted before we close the quarter. Let's not get bogged down in standard vendor protocols. This is a special arrangement." The CFO, a man loyal to Charles, had simply replied, "Understood. As long as Kylie signs off on the asset side, we can push it through." They were all in on it. They were waiting for my signature, as the head of aviation assets, was the key that unlocked the vault. They were using my authority, my credibility, to steal $12 million. They were not just stealing from Lumen Edge. They were using me as the instrument of the crime. I closed my eyes for just a second. I pictured Grant on the jet with Sloan. I pictured Evelyn's smug smile. I pictured this dinner, the one they were planning, where they would discard me. And I knew exactly what to do. I did not call the company's main banking liaison. That line went straight back to the CFO, and by extension, to Charles. I picked up my personal cell phone. I had my own contacts. I had spent 7 years building this division, and that included relationships. I called a senior VP at the private bank that held our capital accounts. A woman named Maria I had worked with for years. A woman I had personally cultivated. "Maria, it's Kylie Hughes at Lumen Edge," I said, my voice perfectly calm, professional. "I'm looking at the wire instructions for the new Gulf Stream, and I have a compliance concern." "Kylie," she said, her voice warm but all business. "What's the issue?" "My executive team is pushing to route the final $12 million through a new third-party LLC, Harbor Crest Strategic Procurement. I've never heard of them. They're not on my vendor list, and they aren't the brokerage of record. I'm not comfortable releasing that amount of capital to an unknown entity before we have possession of the asset." This was language Maria understood. This was not a wife complaining. This was an asset manager protecting the bank's client. "I don't like the sound of that either," Maria said, the warmth gone, replaced by the crispness of a banker smelling risk. "What do you want to do?" "I want to change the routing," I said. "I want the standard protection. Can we redirect the funds to a neutral third-party escrow account, in the parent company's name, escrow number 784 Lumen Edge Air Delivery?" We can set the release condition as pending successful delivery and configuration inspection by me. That's standard procedure. I want to cite that as the reason we're ensuring the aircraft is delivered to the exact configuration we paid for before the final funds are released. There was a pause, the sound of typing. Of course, Maria said. That's actually more secure than your original instructions. Smart. You're the authorized signatory on the Aviation Capital account, right? You have sole authority for this. I am, I said. It's in my contract, signed by Charles Keaton himself. Then it's done, she said. Generate the new wire instructions on your end with that escrow account. I'll flag it on our side as the priority directive, and I will personally see that it supersedes any other routing order attached to this transaction code. As long as we receive it by end of day, your $12 million is secure. Thank you. Maria, you'll have it in 5 minutes. I hung up. I pulled up the official, digital wire transfer form. I deleted the account number for Harborcrest Strategic Procurement, LLC. I typed in escrow 784 Lumen Edge Air Delivery. I attached the new routing, the new justification, and I affixed my digital signature. I hit send. A confirmation email popped up almost instantly from the bank's automated system. Wire instruction verified pending release. I did not stop there. I saved a PDF of Grant's original email with the fake LLC. I saved a PDF of the business registry search. I saved a PDF of Grant's internal emails pushing the CFO. I saved a PDF of my new, signed wire instruction. I saved the final confirmation log from the bank. I encrypted the entire file, moved it to a secure, cloud-based drive that had no connection to Lumen Edge, and then forwarded the password to my private email. Then, and only then, did I reply to Grant's original email. I hit reply, but I only replied to him, not his father, not the CFO. Done, I wrote. Payment is processed. See you at dinner tonight. I shut down my computer. I looked at the clock. It was 4 p.m. The wire was in. The trap was set. Grant thought he was stealing $12 million to start his new life with his mistress. He thought tonight's dinner was about firing his wife. He had no idea that I had just taken control of his exit plan. From that moment, I was no longer a victim. I was not a woman being cheated on. I was a financier. I was the person who held the key to $12 million. And I was about to walk into a boardroom disguised as a restaurant, ready to make a report. Securing the $12 million was just the first step. It was a defensive move. Now, I had to figure out what, exactly, I was defending myself against. I knew they were stealing. I knew they were planning to discard me. But I didn't understand the full mechanics of the plan. I didn't know how they planned to do it. The answers came, as they always did with the Keatons, through their own breathtaking arrogance. A week before the celebration dinner, I was walking past Evelyn's office. She ran the family's philanthropic foundation from a palatial suite on the top floor, but she often held strategy meetings in a conference room on my floor, the one overlooking the hangars. She liked to keep an eye on the assets, as she put it. Her voice, that high-tension wire of cultivated aristocracy, cut through the closed oak door. She was on a speakerphone call, loud enough for anyone in the hall to hear. She was not a woman who believed in privacy. She believed in being overheard. And the lawyer confirmed it, Evelyn was saying, clearly to her son or her husband. The new LLC is purely a procurement vehicle. Once Grant transfers the Gulfstream into its holding, it's a separate entity. We can then lease it back to Lumen Edge for a profit. A pause. I stopped, pretending to check my phone. Yes, exactly, she continued, her voice dripping with satisfaction. It streamlines the entire portfolio, and, more importantly, it means we don't need to keep the girl managing it. Her oversight becomes redundant. The girl, not Kylie, not the head of aviation, not their daughter-in-law of 7 years, the girl. We can finally move her to that consultancy role, Evelyn said. It's cleaner. If Grant can finalize the separation of the jet from the corporate books, we don't need to keep her on the payroll. She can't touch it. There it was, the entire plan. laid bare by a mother too arrogant to use a handset. The $12 million was not just theft. It was the seed money to create a new, private company, with my new jet as its primary asset. They were going to steal the Gulf Stream, put it in a company Grant controlled, and then they were going to streamline me out of a job. Evelyn had always seen me as an employee. She was the one who, years ago, had spotted my potential at a logistics conference and introduced me to Charles. "You simply must hire her, darling," she'd said, as if discovering a promising new caterer. Because she had been the one to introduce me, she felt she was the one who had the right to dismiss me. My marriage to her son only complicated the paperwork. As far as she was concerned, it brought back Charles's voice from a family dinner 6 months prior. Grant had made a casual, cutting remark about my family's middle-class sensibilities. I had retorted, a little too sharply, that at least my family paid their taxes. There was a dead, cold silence. Later, Charles cornered me by the bar. He did not raise his voice. He never did. He just leaned in, smelling of expensive scotch, and said, "You are not the type of person we will ever apologize to. Kylie, remember that. If there is a problem, you are the one who will be removed." I was temporary. I was a contractor. I was the girl, and I saw, with chilling clarity, who they were grooming to be my replacement. Sloan Mercer. It was one thing to see her name on a flight log. It was another to see her. 2 nights later, in the society pages of the Harbor Crest Gazette, there was a photo from the museum gala, an event I had skipped, claiming a migraine, and there was Sloan, standing next to Evelyn, both of them wearing the same shade of silver, their heads tilted together as if sharing a delightful secret. My husband's mistress was not being hidden. She was being vetted. She was being introduced to the herd, her scent mingling with the Keatons, so that when she was finally moved into the primary position, no one in their world would be surprised. She was not a sordid affair. She was the next acquisition. The final, devastating piece of the puzzle landed in my inbox 3 days ago. It was an email, forwarded to me by my own assistant, who was just as loyal to me as Grant's were to him. "Kylie," her note said. "This was sent to the HR generalist by mistake. I think you need to see it. The original email was from Grant, to his mother. Subject re-asset management transition. Mom, I agree. The dinner on the 5th is the perfect time to finalize this. After we've celebrated the acquisition, I'll break the news to Kylie about her new role. It's time to move the management reward for the aviation assets over to Sloan. As you said, she has a much better public-facing image for the brand, and she understands the family's vision. I'll have HR draft the independent consultant agreement. She can keep her title for a while if she makes a fuss. But the key is to get her off the payroll and out of the corporate accounts by the end of the quarter. Let's get this done. G." I read it 3 times. The air in my office turned thin and sharp. He was not just leaving me for another woman. He was not just stealing $12 million. He was stealing my job, my work, the division I had built from a single plane and a messy ledger, the literal blood, sweat, and jet fuel-scented hours I had poured into this company. He was taking my professional identity, my life's work, and handing it to his mistress as a reward, like a trinket, a party favor. He was going to give Sloan my image. I pulled up the shared HR drive. I still had level 1 executive access. It was all there, a draft proposal, marked Confidential Keaton Executive Review. It proposed a restructuring of the Lumen Edge Air Division. It cited new efficiencies and the separation of capital assets, the new jet, and it outlined my new position, independent consultant, aviation logistics. It was a ghost role, no salary, only a small retainer, no benefits, and by the kill shot no access to the company's financial accounts, vendor lists, or scheduling dashboards. It was a professional assassination, wrapped in the polite, bloodless language of a human resources memo. This was their plan. This was the celebration. The dinner at Auden was the stage. They would sit me at that table, flanked by Charles and Evelyn, and Grant would hand me my own corporate death warrant alongside the dessert menu. They would do it in public, with their smiles firmly in place, knowing I would not dare make a scene. They would expect me to take it, to accept my demotion, because what choice did I have? The $12 million would be gone, the new jet would be in Grant's new company, and I would be the girl, a consultant with no power. I looked at the date on my screen. The dinner was tonight. My access was still active, but it would not be by 9 a.m. tomorrow. I knew, with an icy certainty, that if I let this dinner proceed as they planned, I would be locked out of my own office by morning. My files, my proof, my access to the bank logs, all of it would be gone. Changing the wire transfer was not enough. I had stopped the theft, but I had not stopped the execution. I needed to do more than just stop them. I needed to burn their plan to the ground. To do that, I needed an accelerant. I needed someone who knew the Keaton family's particular brand of fire. They had done this before, the way they moved the shell company, the social exclusion, the professional assassination. It was all too practiced. They had a history of erasing people. I opened a new private browser window, and I started searching for the last person the Keaton family had erased. I knew their plan. Now I just needed the ammunition to blow it up. My executive access was a labyrinth of corporate history, and I intended to walk every inch of it before they locked me out. I started with the foundation, the formation documents for LumenEdge Air. I wanted to see the original sin. I dug into the deep archives, the digitized folders from over a decade ago. Back when the company was just LumenEdge Charter Services, the records were clean, but one name kept appearing on the initial filings, right next to Charles Keaton's Rhett Langford. Co-founder and chief operations officer, I had been with this company, and this family, for 7 years. I had never heard the name Rhett Langford, not once. I went to the current LumenEdge website, the About Us page, the one Evelyn had Sloan's team redesign. It had a glowing, sanitized history of the company's growth. Charles Keaton was listed as the sole visionary founder of the Air Division. Rhett Langford did not exist. He had been scrubbed. A person does not co-found a multi-million-dollar division and simply vanish. He is erased. I moved to a private, non-company browser. I searched the digital archives of the Harbor Crest Gazette. It took me less than 10 minutes. A series of articles from almost exactly 10 years ago. Local aviation pioneer sues LumenEdge CEO. Langford accuses Keaton of opaque brokerage fees. Bitter dispute at LumenEdge Air ends in forced buyout. The articles painted a picture so familiar it made my skin crawl. Rhett Langford, the aviation expert, had built the charter service with Charles. When they landed their first major financing round, Rhett publicly accused Charles of diverting funds through unminimized, a polite word for inflated brokerage fees paid to a company owned by Evelyn's brother. Rhett had threatened to go to the board. A week later, a press release announced Rhett's resignation due to personal health issues. He had been bought out for pennies on the dollar, forced to sign a crushing NDA, and was professionally smeared as unstable and difficult to work with. It was the exact same playbook: the shell company, the difficult employee, the erasure. I found him on LinkedIn. He was still in Harbor Crest, listed as an independent aviation consultant. His profile was sharp, professional, and current. He was still in the game. He had survived them. I sent him a message, a single, direct line from my private account. I believe we have a common enemy. The reply came back in under 60 seconds. When and where? We met the next day. 48 hours before the dinner, I chose a small, loud cafe near the old municipal airport, a place that smelled of burnt coffee and real jet fuel. It was the last place on earth Evelyn Keaton or Sloan Mercer would ever be. He walked in, and I knew him instantly from the old news photos. He was in his early 40s, maybe a few years older than me. He was sharp, fit, with the kind of intense, appraising eyes that are common in our industry, but there was a weariness there, a shadow of a fight he had lost a decade ago but never stopped refighting in his head. He was still in pain. "Ms. Hughes," he said, not offering a hand, just sliding into the booth. "Your message was efficient. I did not waste time with pleasantries. The Keatons had taught me the value of efficiency. Mr. Langford, you were right about Charles Keaton 10 years ago, and his son is doing it again. But this time, he's using me, my credentials, and my division to do it. I laid it all out. The flight logs for Santa Aurelia, Grant's affair with Sloan, the $12 million wire transfer, the fake LLC, Harborcrest strategic procurement, the plan to move me into a sham consultancy role and give my job to his mistress. I spoke for 5 minutes, uninterrupted, a cold, factual report. He just listened. He did not look shocked. He did not look sympathetic. He just nodded, his eyes fixed on mine, as if finally seeing a ghost he had known was there all along. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then, a low, bitter laugh rumbled in his chest. He said, the old-fashioned phrase sounding like a curse, exactly the same. They used my name on the loan guarantees, and the moment the money was in, they used their lawyers to lever me out. A new jet, a new LLC. It's the same old playbook. He looked at me, and for the first time, a spark of something other than weariness was in his eyes. It was fire. You changed the routing, he stated. It was not a question. I rerouted the entire $12 million to a secure corporate escrow account, I confirmed. The release is tied to an in-person inspection and signature. My signature, his laugh this time was genuine. A sharp, sudden bark of appreciation. Good. Good for you. You cut the fuel line, but they'll just refuel. Ms. Hughes, they'll fire you, lock you out, and find another way to sign. That's why I'm here, I said. They're planning to restructure me at a dinner tonight. I'm going to tell them about the escrow account in front of a board member they're bringing, but Grant will just paint it as a marital dispute, a scorned wife making things up. I need more. I need proof of a pattern. I need what you had. Rhett stared at me. They made me sign an NDA. I can't testify. I don't need you to testify, I said, leaning in. I need the original charter for LumenEdge Air, the one you signed with Charles, the one I'll bet my life he lost in a records fire, the one that defines how assets are purchased. A slow smile spread across his face. He didn't just lose it. His lawyers told me it was irrelevant after the restructuring, but they forgot one thing. He stood up. Wait here. He was gone for less than 2 minutes. He returned from his car, holding a thin, worn leather briefcase. He sat down and, from inside it, pulled a document. It was bound in old-fashioned blue legal paper, the kind they do not make anymore. He slid it across the table. Original Operating Agreement, LumenEdge Charter Services, LLC, and there, on the signature page, were 2 names, a sprawling, arrogant Charles Keaton, and a precise, clear Rhett Langford. Turn to Article 4, Section B, he said, his voice quiet. I turned. My fingers traced the indented, typed words. All aviation assets acquired via corporate funds or corporate guaranteed financing shall be titled solely to the parent entity. LumenEdge Consolidated. No asset shall be transferred, leased, or otherwise encumbered by any special purpose vehicle, private holding company, or individual partner without a unanimous recorded vote of the full board of directors. It was the smoking gun. It was the kill shot. Charles and Grant were not just breaking protocol. They were in direct violation of the company's founding charter. They're planning to do it without a board vote, I whispered, the weight of the document settling on me. Of course they are, Rhett said. The board is their toy. But even they wouldn't be stupid enough to approve a direct transfer to the CEO's son. This is fraud. Kylie. He used my first name. This is not just a family spat. This is a criminal offense. I need a copy, I said, my voice shaking slightly, not with fear, but with adrenaline. I will not file it with a lawyer. Not yet. I'll read it. I'll read it aloud to them at that table tonight. Rhett looked at the document, his hand resting on it, like an old wound. A copy is good, he said softly, but it won't be enough. They'll just deny it. They'll say it's fake. They'll say you're hysterical." He looked up, and his eyes were absolutely clear. "If you really want to make them hurt, if you want to end this, let me come." I recoiled. "What? Let me be there tonight. You said they're bringing a board member. They're going to try and discredit you. Grant will call you crazy. Evelyn will call you ungrateful. Charles will just stare at you until you cease to exist. It's what they do." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "But they can't do that to me. I'm the man they already destroyed. I'm the ghost." The one thing people like the Keatons truly fear is the past they thought they had buried walking right back into the present. I hesitated. It was a massive risk. My plan was clean. Financial. He was emotional. He was a variable I could not control, but as I looked at him, I realized he was right. Grant would dismiss me as a hysterical wife. Evelyn would call it a family matter. Charles would have me removed for causing a scene. But Rhett was business. He was the history they had tried to delete. My claim, plus his presence, was not a marital spat. It was a pattern of conspiracy. "Okay," I said, my voice firm. "But not at the table. Not with me." "No," he agreed, a wolfish grin touching his lips for the first time. "I'll be at the bar. I'll be having a quiet drink. Waiting. You make your move. You hit them with the escrow. You hit them with the charter. And when they start to call you crazy, you give me the signal. I'll be your confirmation." We made a plan. He knew the restaurant. He knew the layout. He would be there at 8 p.m. sharp. He would wait. I left the cafe with a certified copy of the charter in my bag and a dangerous, unfamiliar feeling in my chest. It was not just anger. It was not just focus. It was the cold, thrilling calm of an alliance. I was not just a wife fighting her husband. I was an executive, with a ghost for backup, walking into a war. I had my ally, and I had my weapon. But a weapon is useless without a fortress to fire it from. I had less than 24 hours until the dinner. Less than 24 hours before my access to the Lumen Edge systems would be cut forever. The heist had to be fast, and it had to be perfect. I went back to my office at Lumen Edge Air. My home. My kingdom. It was after 7 p.m., and the building was quiet. The cleaning crews wouldn't be on my floor for another hour. I locked my door, the click of the heavy lock echoing in the silence. First, I downloaded the poison. I started with the hangar security server. I pulled the high-definition video files from that Friday night. I watched Grant, my husband, his hand on the small of Sloane Mercer's back, guiding her up the steps of the Falcon. I watched him laugh, his head tilted back, a genuine laugh I had not heard in years. I exported the file. I saved it to a clean, untraceable USB drive I had bought with cash. Next, I went to the flight operations database. I printed the manifests, hard copies. I wanted the paper in my hand. Lee 8 Falcon, destination SC Private, passengers 2, Grant Keaton, S, Mercer. I printed the catering invoice that Ben had told me about. 1 bottle, Domaine Haute Rosé, 1 arrangement, white roses. I used the high-quality color printer in my office. I wanted them to see the ink. Then, I moved to the real crime, the money. I pulled up my email, the thread I had been building. Grant's original, casual email. Route this through an intermediary to save us on the brokerage fees. The fake company name, Harborcrest Strategic Procurement, LLC. I saved the entire email, including the metadata. As a PDF, I went into the compliance server and pulled the state business filing for the LLC. Data formation. 3 months ago, Registered Agent Grant's old colleague, another PDF. I saved the email chain between Grant, Charles, and the CFO, Grant's urgent, arrogant push. Before we close the quarter, this is a special arrangement, the CFO's complicit reply, as long as Kylie signs off. And finally, the most important document, my action. I saved the final, executed wire instruction, the one bearing my digital signature, clearly and legibly rerouting $12 million not to the fake LLC, but to escrow number 784 Lumen Edge Air Delivery. I saved the bank's automated time-stamped confirmation, wire instruction verified. I had the complete story, from crime to consequence, in a single encrypted file. I moved the encrypted file and the raw video file onto the cache-bought USB drive. I logged out of my system, and for the last time, I wiped the local cache. My next stop was Harborcrest International Airport. Not my private terminal, but the main public concourse. It was loud, anonymous, and filled with people going somewhere. I walked to the banks of automated lockers in Terminal C. I rented one for 72 hours, inside the cold, metal box. I placed the original, blue-bound charter agreement Rhett had given me. I placed the USB drive next to it. I locked the door and pocketed the small, insignificant key. It was my insurance policy, hidden in plain sight, safe from any corporate lockdown or court order they could file tomorrow. From the airport, I drove to a bank where I did not have an account, a bank that had no affiliation with LumenEdge or the Keaton family. I had an appointment I had made 2 days ago under my maiden name. I sat down with a private wealth manager, a woman who looked at me with polite, professional disinterest. I was just another client. I need to open a new, private account, solely in my name, I said, and I need to fund it immediately with a transfer from my personal savings. I initiated the transfer. It was a significant amount. The entire balance of my premarital savings account. The money I had earned and invested long before I had ever heard the name Keaton. It was the one account Grant had no access to. The one protected by the very prenup his mother had insisted I sign. It was, I thought with a grim smile, the in case of emergency fund. The emergency was here. By the time I left, the transfer was in progress. By morning, my personal funds would be secure, liquid, and completely outside of his reach. My last stop before going home was a small, independent post office center. I filled out the forms to open a new PEO box. Then, I filled out a change of address form for all my personal mail, my new, private bank statements, any legal correspondence, any letters from my future. They would no longer be delivered to the sterile white house I shared with Grant. They would be delivered to a locked box that only I had the key to. I was cutting them off, piece by piece. I had my evidence. I had my money. I had my secure communications. I was missing only one thing: the lawyer. Her name was Alicia Romero. I had been given her name by a woman I trusted, another female executive who had survived a Keaton-style ouster from her own company. She's not a divorce lawyer, my friend had told me. She's a wrecking ball. She doesn't just win, she dismantles. I had sent her a short, encrypted email 2 days ago. Her reply was simple. I have an opening at 7 p.m. Bring everything. I sat in her office, a clean, modern space of glass and steel, at 7:30 p.m. She was sharp, dressed in a way that signaled she was both expensive and not to be trifled with. She had not said a word, just motioned for me to talk. I did not cry. I did not rage. I gave her the briefing, just as I had given it to Rhett, but with more detail. The affair, the jet, the $12 million, the fake LLC, the charter, the escrow account, the plan to fire me. She listened, her pen moving across a legal pad. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. She tapped the pen against the pad. Once, twice. Well, Ms. Hughes, she said, her voice crisp, this is a beautiful, beautiful case. This isn't a marital spat. This is a clear-cut case of attempted corporate fraud, conspiracy, and breach of fiduciary duty. The infidelity is just the cherry on top. She looked at me, a hint of a smile on her lips. Your timing on the escrow was perfect. A masterpiece, really. They're having a dinner tonight, I said. At Auden, they're bringing a board member. They're going to try and remove me. Good, Alicia said. Let them. You're an executive. You have a fiduciary duty to report your findings. The board member's presence is a gift. You report, factually, that you discovered a financial irregularity and a breach of the founding charter, and that you took executive action to secure $12 million of company capital. You make him the witness. She leaned forward. My advice, as your new counsel, is this: do not, under any circumstance, touch or discuss any asset that is not explicitly under your contractual authority. You are the head of aviation assets. You acted to protect those assets. That is your shield, and it is your sword. And the money? I asked. The money in that escrow account is the safest thing in this city, Alicia said, standing up. It's a locked box, and you are the only one with the key. They cannot get it. To get it, they have to go through you. And as of this moment, that means they have to go through me. And I am Ms. Hughes. Very, very expensive. She handed me a card. I'll start drafting the divorce petition and the corporate malfeasance complaint tonight. You light the fuse. Kylie, let me know when you want me to file. Tomorrow morning, I said, taking the card. We file tomorrow morning. I drove home. The house was empty. Grant was still at work, no doubt preparing for his victory. I sat at my desk and I wrote out my lines. I was not preparing a speech as a wife. There was no, how could you, or after all we've been through. I wrote a report, a cool, factual, devastating report from a C-suite executive to a board member. It was all business. When I was done, I picked up my phone. I sent one last text message to Rhett Langford. Auden, 8 p.m., table 12, the corner booth. They've added a guest, Martin Hale, from the board. I'll need you when they try to call it a family matter. His reply was immediate. I'll be at the bar. I closed the laptop. Everything was done. The evidence was secure. The money was locked down. The lawyer was ready. The ally was in place. I walked to the closet and took out the dark blue dress Grant had asked me to wear. I put it on. I looked in the mirror. Grant had no idea that the wire transfer he'd been waiting for had been diverted. He had no idea that his wife, the one he thought was a soft and compliant fool, had just prepared his entire execution. He was walking into a celebration. I was walking into a war. The morning of the dinner, the day of my own scheduled execution, began with a command from on high. My phone rang at precisely 8:15 a.m. Evelyn. She was never one for casual morning chats. Kylie, she said, her voice like a chilled glass. Just a reminder about tonight. I trust you'll be sensible. Wear something dark, navy, or black. This is Grant's evening, not yours. We don't need any distractions. You're there to support him. Of course, Evelyn, I said, my voice a perfect, smooth blend of compliance and crushed spirit. I wouldn't dream of drawing focus. Good, she said, and hung up. I was not an accessory. I was a backdrop. The next communication came an hour later. A text message from Grant. He was already at the office, probably rehearsing his speech. Kylie, I know things have been tense, but after tonight, I promise, you'll feel much more comfortable. We're just formalizing a new chapter. For all of us, please, don't make this difficult. Comfortable, the word they use when they're about to put you in a smaller cage. Don't make this difficult, the classic Keaton command, the one that meant do not fight back. It's beneath us to have to deal with your emotions. He was so confident, so sure that I was the same woman he'd married, the one who would politely swallow any insult to keep the peace. It was time to give that woman one last, convincing performance. I called his office line. He picked up on the first ring, probably surprised. Grant, I said, pitching my voice with just the right amount of wifely confusion. I just got off the phone with Evelyn. I'm getting everything ready for tonight, and I was just looking at my desk, at the paperwork for the new jet. Kylie, I'm busy, he said, his tone impatient. I know. I'm sorry, I said, playing the part of the flustered, slightly in over her head executive. It's just that last payment, the one you had me push through to that Harborcrest procurement thing. My system flagged it as a non-standard vendor, and I wanted to make sure it was all okay. I wouldn't want compliance to call me. I let my voice trail off, as if I were afraid of the answer. I heard him sigh, a deep, exasperated sound. It was the sound of a man dealing with a simpleton. "Kylie, for God's sake, do you really need me to hold your hand on this? It's a special arrangement. A strategic partnership. I told you that. It's fine. It's handled." "Oh," I said, infusing my voice with pure, unadulterated relief. "Oh, good. I'm so sorry to bother you. I just got nervous. You know, with $12 million, it's a lot." "It is a lot," he said, and I could hear the smug smile in his voice. "That's why I handled the strategy. You just had to sign. Now, I have to go. I'll see you at 7. And wear the blue dress." He hung up. He was a god in his own mind, and he had just confirmed, from his own mouth, that he had personally directed the special arrangement. He was so sure of my incompetence that he didn't even hear the click of the trap he had just armed against himself, the true gift. However, came 2 hours later. An email landed in my inbox. It was from Charles. The subject line was, "The new bird is almost home." It was a family email chain. He had sent it to Grant, to Evelyn, and to their personal wealth manager. And, in the most breathtaking act of hubris I had ever witnessed, Charles Keaton had also CC'd Sloan Mercer. He had added my husband's mistress to an email thread discussing the acquisition of a $12 million corporate asset. My hands were steady as I read the body of the email. "All, Grant has confirmed the final wire is in motion. This is a magnificent strategic win. This asset will form the cornerstone of the new family holding. Evelyn, well done on finding our new partner on this." He meant Sloan. Our new partner, but the final, damning, beautiful piece of evidence was not from Charles. It came 5 minutes later, a reply all from Sloan Mercer. She had replied to Charles Keaton, Grant Keaton, and Evelyn Keaton. Her entire message was a single emoji, a champagne glass, a toast. She was not just the mistress. She was a co-conspirator. She knew about the money. She knew about the new family holding. She was celebrating the theft, in writing, with the entire family. I stared at the screen. This one email, this one tiny, stupid emoji, was everything. It proved this was not just an affair. It was not just Grant being a bad husband. This was a conspiracy, including his mistress, to defraud Lumen Edge Consolidated. I did not save this email to a USB. I did not print it. I stood up, walked to my office door, and opened it. My assistant, Maria, was at her desk, just outside. She was loyal, she was smart, and she had seen the way the Keatons treated staff. "Maria," I said, "I have to run to the hangar for a minute. Can you keep an eye on my office? I'm expecting a call." I left my computer on. I left my email open. I left the light emoji glowing on the 27-inch monitor in plain sight of her desk for a full 5 minutes. When I returned, she was at her desk, typing furiously, and she did not meet my eyes. She had seen it. I now had an internal family witness. I sat back down at my desk and made one final move. I opened my calendar. I created a new meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow. I invited the entire Lumen Edge legal department and the chief compliance officer. The subject: urgent review of aircraft acquisition protocols and founding charter violations. The body: please be prepared to discuss potential malfeasance regarding the new Gulfstream acquisition. Transaction code G789. I have discovered significant irregularities. I hit send. The rest of the day was a study in grotesque normalcy. The trap was set. The alarms were timed. The villains were happily walking into the kill zone. I saw Grant walk through the lobby at lunch, back from his barber. His hair was perfect. Evelyn's assistant called the restaurant twice, once to confirm the table, and once to confirm the exact vintage of champagne they would be starting with. At 4 p.m., an update to the dinner reservation popped up in my calendar. Charles had added a guest. Martin Hale. Martin Hale. My breath caught. Not just a board member. He was the board member. The one who wasn't a Keaton relative. The one who chaired the audit committee. The one who Charles was constantly trying to impress, to keep on his side. Charles was bringing the head of the audit committee to a dinner where his family planned to celebrate corporate theft. The arrogance was so pure, so profound. It was almost beautiful. This was not a complication. This was a gift. My plan had been to make this a corporate matter. Now, I did not have to. Charles was bringing the corporation to me. He was delivering my key witness. I would not just be talking to a board member. I would be reporting directly to the head of the audit committee, in real time. They could not scream at me. They could not call me a hysterical wife. They could not call it a private family matter in front of Martin Hale. I stood up. I looked at the dark blue dress hanging on the back of my door. It was 7 p.m. Time to go. Grant was waiting by the door, jangling his keys, radiating an impatient, excited energy. He looked at me, his eyes skimming over me as if I were a piece of furniture. "Good," he said. "You're ready? Let's go. It's a big night." "Yes, it is, Grant," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "A very big night." They all believed they were coming to dinner to watch me die. They had no idea they were the main course. The champagne was poured. The first course, a delicate construction of scallops and foam, was served. The Keatons were predators, and they liked to let their prey settle in before the first bite. Martin Hale, the board member, was a solid, unflappable man in his late 60s. He was old money allotted to Charles's new, ruthless money. He was here, I realized, to be a witness. They were that confident. They wanted him to see Grant take charge, to see the family consolidate power, and to see me graciously accept my demotion. "Martin," Charles was saying, "it's a new era for us. Grant has shown remarkable vision with this Gulfstream acquisition. He's not just a son, he's a strategist. It's an impressive move." "Grant," Martin said, nodding. "A $12 million asset is a strong play." Grant soaked it in, his smile tight and controlled. "Thank you, Martin. We think so. It's all about efficiency, cutting out the unnecessary weight." He turned to me. The main event had arrived. "In fact," he said, reaching into his suit jacket, "I got a little something for you, Kylie, to commemorate the new bird." He slid the thin, silver-wrapped box across the table, the one I had been expecting, the one that was meant to be my public humiliation. My hands were steady. I looked at him, then at Evelyn, who was watching me with a raptor's focus. I unwrapped it. The laminated itinerary. The red circle around 2 guests. The handwritten note. Grant leaned in, his voice a low, cruel mockery meant for the whole table to hear. "See, darling, the jet flies beautifully when it's not carrying unnecessary baggage." Evelyn let out her sharp, amused laugh. "Oh, Grant, you are terrible." She turned to Martin, a picture of indulgent motherhood. "Men simply must have their amusements. Martin, it's a right they earn, as long as they keep bringing home valuable assets, like this new jet. For instance." Martin Hale looked uncomfortable for the first time, his eyes flicking from the laminated card to me. He was an auditor. He was not a fan of domestic theater, especially when it was this vulgar. They all stared at me. Grant, smug and triumphant, Evelyn, victorious, Charles, impassive, which was his highest form of approval. They were waiting for the tears, the whisper, the retreat. I did not give them any of it. I smiled, a small, polite, professional smile. I tucked the itinerary into my clutch. Then, I picked up my water glass, not the champagne. I wanted a clear head, and I stood up. The movement was abrupt. It broke the script. Grant's smile faltered. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Thank you, Grant," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the quiet, expensive room. "What an illuminating performance. From all of you." I turned my body, just slightly, to face Martin Hale, the guest of honor, the head of the audit committee. "You're right," I said, my gaze locking on Grant. "It is a night for big announcements, and I'm so glad you're all here, especially you. Martin, because as the head of aviation assets for Lumen Edge, I also have an update on that $12 million acquisition. The air at the table went from tense to solid. Kylie, sit down, Charles said. It was not a request. In a moment. Charles, I said politely. This is a matter of corporate record. I'm sure Mr. Hale will find it very relevant. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. It was not the charter, not yet. It was the wire confirmation. Grant, you're right, I said. I did sign the payment order you sent me, the one for $12 million, the one you wanted routed to an entity called Harbor Crest Strategic Procurement LLC. Grant's face was a mask, but his eyes went flat with panic. He knew. I just wanted to update you, I continued, my voice smooth and professional, as if delivering a quarterly report. That is not where the money went. What? Evelyn's voice was a sharp crack. As of 4 p.m. today, I said, I felt it was my fiduciary duty to protect the company's capital from a non-vetted, newly formed, and unapproved vendor. So, I rerouted the funds. The $12 million is not, I repeat, not in Grant's shell company. It is currently sitting in a locked, corporate-owned escrow account, number 784-Lumen Edge Air Delivery. And the only way it gets released is with my signature, pending a full inspection. Dead silence. Grant looked like he had been shot. He was not breathing. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty, sick gray. He understood. The money was gone. His key was gone. Charles was the first to recover. His rage was a physical force, a wave of heat from across the table. You did what? He hissed, his voice a low growl. Who in the hell gave you the authority to countermand a direct executive order? I turned to him, my smile gone. My job title, I said, my voice as cold as his. My contractual obligations as Director of Aviation Assets, Company Policy, Section 4, which dictates that all non-standard, high-value transfers must be secured. You should know. Charles, your name is on my employment contract, which I signed 3 years ago. You gave me that authority. This is insane, Grant finally choked out. Finding his voice, he looked at Martin, desperate. Martin, this is a domestic issue. My wife she's upset. She's not thinking clearly. Am I not? I asked. I pulled my iPad from my bag. I am thinking very clearly. Grant, I'm thinking about the other reason I couldn't approve a $12 million asset being controlled by you. You see, I was concerned about your judgment. I turned on the screen and placed the iPad on the table, facing Martin Hale. This, I said, is the flight manifest for the LE-8 Falcon from 2 weekends ago. Destination Santa Aurelia, a private resort, Passenger 1 Grant Keaton, Passenger 2S, Mercer. I believe you all know her. She's Evelyn's new PR star. Evelyn made a small, strangled sound. And this, I said, swiping the screen, is the high-definition footage from our hangar security camera. As you can see, that is Grant, using a multi-million-dollar corporate asset, our asset, to fly his mistress on a romantic vacation. That is a clear violation of the company's conduct and ethics policy. I then looked, for the first time, directly at Martin Hale. I was no longer a wife. I was an executive making a report to her board. Mr. Hale, I said, my voice firm and clear. This is not a domestic issue. This is a corporate governance crisis. I have, on my authority, stopped the CEO's son from misappropriating $12 million of company funds for a shell company. I also have proof that this same executive is already misusing current assets for his personal life, creating a massive liability for every shareholder. I took a breath. I could not, in good conscience, allow this company to spend another $12 million on an asset only to have the man managing it, a man who is clearly compromised, turn it into a private toy for his affair. The entire restaurant seemed to have gone quiet. The diners at the nearby tables were not even pretending not to listen. This was not a spat. This was a coup. Evelyn looked like she had swallowed acid. Charles's face was purple with a rage so profound he was rendered mute. And Grant? Grant was just staring at the iPad, at the image of himself and Sloane, completely and utterly broken. You bitch, he finally whispered. You will not speak to her that way, Charles roared, slamming his hand on the table, his control finally snapping, but he was not looking at Grant. He was looking at me. This is a family matter, Martin. I apologize. My daughter-in-law is clearly hysterical. She doesn't seem hysterical. Charles, Martin said, his voice dangerously quiet. He was looking at the manifest on the iPad. She seems thorough. This is ridiculous, Evelyn tried, her voice shaking. She's lying. She's making this up to hurt Grant. This is a fabrication. I smiled. Is it, Evelyn? Is it a fabrication? I was worried you might say that. I was worried you would try to paint me as the hysterical wife, and that this was all just a private family matter. I stood to my full height. That's why I brought the company's history with me, and with that, I turned my head, just slightly, and looked past the table, toward the polished oak bar. I made eye contact with Rhett Langford, and I gave him the signal. He placed his glass on the bar, squared his shoulders, and began to walk. Every head in the restaurant turned, not just at our table, but every head. Rhett Langford had that effect. He was not loud, but he took up space, his energy preceding him. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and no tie. He looked powerful, current, and utterly out of place, like a wolf walking into a curated, glass-walled zoo. He did not walk to me. He walked directly to Charles. I watched my father-in-law's face. It was a masterpiece of controlled terror. The purple rage drained away, replaced by a ghastly, waxy pallor. Charles, who had not flinched at my accusations, looked as if he had just seen a dead man get up from a casket. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Evelyn's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated confusion. She did not know who this man was. He was not on her guest list. He was not in her world. Grant, still reeling, just looked lost. But Martin Hale, the board member, knew. His eyes widened, just slightly, in pure, unadulterated recognition. Rhett, he breathed. Rhett stopped at the head of the table, standing directly between Charles and Evelyn. He looked only at Charles. Hello? Charles, Rhett said, his voice calm, polite, and carrying the weight of a decade of suppressed rage. Charles finally found his voice. It was a strangled, horrified whisper. Rhett, I thought we were done. Rhett smiled. It was the most terrifying smile I had ever seen. It was devoid of all humor, all warmth. It was the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. You were done, Charles, Rhett said, his voice conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. You were done by having your lawyers erase my name from the website. You were done by smearing me to the entire industry. He reached into his own breast pocket, slowly, deliberately. You were not, however, done by changing the law. He pulled out the blue, bound document, the original charter. He tossed it onto the table. It landed on top of the bread and butter plate, scattering crumbs. The sound was like a gunshot. The original operating agreement for LumenEdge Air, Rhett announced, his voice now turning hard, projecting for Martin Hale to hear. The one you signed, Charles, the one I signed, the one you later told your lawyers was irrelevant. Rhett turned his gaze, for the first time, to the head of the audit committee. Martin, it's good to see you again. I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner. Rhett, what is this? Martin said, his voice grave. He was no longer a dinner guest. He was a board member in a crisis. This, Rhett said, tapping the document, is the founding law of this company, and I just heard my former partner's daughter-in-law describe a clear-cut conspiracy to violate it. He looked back at Charles, his eyes burning. Article 4, Section B, you remember that? don't you, Charles? Or did you restructure that from your memory? 2. He did not wait for an answer. He looked at Martin. It states, in no uncertain terms, that all aviation assets, all of them acquired with corporate funds, must be titled to the parent company, Lumen Edge Consolidated. It explicitly forbids transferring them to any special purpose vehicle or private holding company without a unanimous vote of the full board. He gestured to me. Ms. Hughes just reported that your CEO and your CEO in waiting were attempting to divert $12 million to a private LLC to do exactly that, to steal a corporate asset, to commit fraud. The words hung in the air, heavy and lethal. Fraud. This was the moment. I stepped back in, my voice cutting through the silence Rhett had created. That's correct. Mr. Hale, I said, my voice as firm as Rhett's. But they had a problem. They couldn't move the money as long as I was the head of assets, as long as I had signing authority. So they created a plan. I looked at Grant, at Evelyn. They were going to have this dinner tonight. They were going to celebrate, and then they were going to inform me that my job was being restructured. They were going to move me into a powerless, independent consultant role, stripping me of my signing authority. I let the words sink in. And then, once I was out of the way, they were going to have the CFO, who was already in on it, make the transfer. They were going to steal the plane after they had fired me. I changed the routing before they got the chance. It was too much for Grant. His entire world, his money, his father's approval, his mistress was evaporating. He snapped. He lunged up from his chair, his face a grotesque mask of fury. "She's lying," he roared, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She's lying. She's the one who's compromised. She's having an affair in the company. She's sleeping with someone in the company. And this is all just a pathetic revenge plot." The accusation was so wild, so desperately thrown, that it almost made me laugh. He was cornered, so he was trying to mirror his own crime onto me. I did not raise my voice. I did not flinch. I just looked at him, my expression one of almost clinical pity. "Grant, that's just sad," I said, my voice quiet but cutting. "I don't need to sleep with anyone to enforce company policy." I paused, then looked at Martin Hale. He, on the other hand, did use a $12 million company jet to sleep with Sloan Mercer. I have the receipts. He doesn't. Rhett stepped in, a perfect, brutal 1-2 punch. "And it's the exact same playbook," he said, his voice booming with a decade of righteousness. He looked at Martin. "This is exactly what he did 10 years ago. Martin, he used company funds, funneled through an SPV owned by Evelyn's brother, to pay brokerage fees on our first major financing round. He used corporate assets to enrich his own family. And when I caught him and threatened to go to the board, who did he blame me? He told everyone I was the one who was unstable, that I was the one having difficulties at home." Rhett pointed a finger at Charles. "The Keaton family playbook use company assets for your family and your mistresses, and when you get caught, you blame the person who found the evidence." The room was in an uproar. The manager was approaching, but Martin Hale held up a hand, a silent, powerful, "Stay back." He was the authority in the room now. The dinner party had become a deposition. Evelyn saw it all slipping away. Her name, her family, her son. She had one card left to play, the card of the matriarch, the one of shame. She stood up, her entire body trembling with a force that was no longer elegant. She looked at me, her face a contortion of pure hatred. "You, child," she spat, the word dripping with venom. "After everything we have given you, we brought you in. We gave you a name. We gave you a life. We gave you a job. And this is how you repay us. You ungrateful, little." She was cut off, by me. "Ungrateful," I said, my voice rising, not in anger, but in sheer, cold disbelief. "You're right, Evelyn, you did give me a job you were planning to take away and give to my husband's mistress as a reward." I stepped closer to her, lowering my voice. You're angry, not because I'm lying, but because I'm telling the truth in front of the help. You're angry because I didn't have the good graces to let you destroy me quietly. I turned back to the table, to all of them. Your gratitude was a temporary lease. You let me in. You let me build your entire air division, just so you could kick me out the second the real asset, the new jet, was transferred. You were going to use my signature, my work, and my credibility to steal it, and then throw me away. I leaned in, my final words for her. Sorry, Evelyn, I figured it out. I'm just a better calculator than you are. She fell back into her chair as if I had physically struck her. She was done. Charles was done. Grant was a ghost. I had the floor, and all of them, the Keatons, Martin Hale, and half of the restaurant's patrons, were now a captive audience, forced to listen to the final part of my report. I let that sink in. I let the word calculator hang in the air. A final, cold assessment of the woman who thought she was a queen but was, in the end, just a bad bookkeeper. Then, for the last time, I reached into my clutch. I pulled out a thick, crisp, white envelope. It was not from a greeting card store. It was from the desk of Alicia Romero. Her law firm's name was embossed, simple and severe, in the top left corner. I did not hand it to Grant. I slid it across the white linen, past the untouched champagne, and placed it directly in front of him. It landed with a soft, final thud. "What is that?" he whispered, his eyes wide, looking at the envelope as if it were a bomb. "That, Grant," I said, "is a formal notification from my attorney. 2 things. 1, as of tomorrow morning, she will be filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery and conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. 2, that is a formal notice to preserve all assets, joint and individual. My lawyer, you see, is very interested in that little shell company you and your father set up. She thinks it shows a clear pattern of intent to hide marital assets." Martin Hale winced, his legal mind no doubt processing the nightmare I had just unleashed. I turned back to the table, my voice now the calm, clear voice of an executive issuing final directives. "Let me be perfectly clear about what happens next," I said, my gaze sweeping from Grant to Charles to Evelyn. "That $12 million in escrow number 784 will not be moved, touched, or accessed by anyone, not by you, not by me. It is frozen, pending a full review by the audit committee, which Mr. Hale now has the unfortunate duty of initiating. You will not be buying that jet, Grant, and you will certainly not be putting Sloan Mercer on any company aircraft, ever again. And as for me," I continued, before any of them could speak, "effective tomorrow, 9 a.m., I will be taking a paid administrative leave, as is my right as a senior executive. I will be using that time to cooperate fully with my lawyers, and of course, with Lumen Edge's internal audit team. I want to give them everything they need for a thorough investigation." I smiled, a thin, sharp smile. "And I do mean everything." I let my eyes rest on Grant, then Evelyn. "I have, for instance, a fascinating email chain, the one where Charles congratulates his new partner on the acquisition, and the one where Sloan herself replies all, with a champagne emoji. It's so collaborative. I am sure the compliance department will find it just as illuminating as I did. That is, if you try to smear me or delete the files. But don't worry, I have copies." That was it. The final, desperate, primal scream. Grant, a man reduced to a child, his entire future imploding. "You cannot do this," he yelled, his voice cracking, tears of pure pathetic rage welling in his eyes. "You cannot just destroy my family like this." The silence that followed his outburst was profound. I looked at him, the man I had once loved, and I felt nothing, not pity, not sadness, just an ending. "I did not destroy your family, Grant," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the table. "I did not create a shell company. I did not lie to the board. I did not take a mistress on a corporate jet. Your family destroyed itself, with your own hands. All I did was turn off the money. Charles, the strategist, saw the game was over. He saw the firewalls were breached. He tried, one last time, for damage control. He turned to Martin, his voice a low, pleading rumble. "Martin," he said, trying to reestablish their bond, man to man. This is a tragedy, a misunderstanding, fueled by a difficult domestic situation. Surely we can handle this, quietly. An internal review. We don't need to." "Charles, stop," Martin Hale said. His voice was not angry. It was exhausted. It was the voice of the audit committee chair, and it was the voice that held all the power. He looked at Charles, his expression one of profound disappointment. "Just stop talking." He turned to me. "Ms. Hughes, your actions tonight, while dramatic, appear to be in line with your fiduciary duty. You have protected a corporate asset, and you have reported potential malfeasance. For that, the board is, well, this is a mess." He then looked at Charles, then Grant. "This is no longer a quiet matter. This is not a misunderstanding. This dinner table has just become an active internal incident scene. As of this moment, I am officially notifying you, Charles, and you, Grant, that I must report every single thing I have heard tonight to the full board. An independent investigation will be launched by morning. You will be hearing from our external counsel. Do you understand me?" It was a total, public, and catastrophic defeat. The Keatons, a family that lived and died by their control over the narrative, had lost it, completely, in the middle of their favorite restaurant. I had done what I came to do. I stood up, pulling my napkin from my lap and placing it, neatly, on the table. I looked at Evelyn. Her face was ashen, her eyes dead. She was a statue of her former self. "You know, Evelyn," I said, my voice soft, "you always treated me like I was just a passenger in your world, someone who was lucky to be invited onto your private plane. You thought I was just temporary." I smiled, my last smile of the night, for her. "But you forgot. I am not a passenger. I am an aviation executive. I am the one who writes the rules, and I am the one who just made damn sure that this jet, and every other jet, belongs to the company, not to your family." My eyes moved to Grant, to the silver-wrapped, laminated itinerary, his gift, still sitting on the table. I picked it up, I folded it. Once, the lamination cracking, I held it out to him. "You wanted to fly, Grant," I said. "You wanted freer flights. You wanted to take her to Santa Aurelia." I dropped the folded card in front of him. "From now on, use your own money." I turned, and I walked away from the table. I did not look back. Rhett was standing by the door. He had paid his bill. He looked at me, and I looked at him. There was no hug. There was no "we did it" celebration. It was not a romantic moment. It was a business transaction. Concluded. It was two survivors, two ghosts from the Keaton graveyard, who had just walked out into the living world, together. He held the door open, and I walked out into the cool Harborcrest night. I left them there. I left Grant, frozen, under the bright, expensive lights of the restaurant. A man who had come to celebrate a victory and was now at the center of his own public execution. I left him to finally, truly understand. He had not just lost his wife. He had not just lost his mistress. He had not just lost $12 million. He had, in his breathtaking arrogance, brought the one man who could dismantle his entire family, Martin Hale, to the table and handed me the microphone. He had lost the one thing the Keatons valued above all else, their reputation, and that was his worst fear. Realized. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so curious. Where are you all listening from? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. Please, if you enjoyed this, subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it some extra support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this.